And when I think about what people can control, normally when people are calling and they're usually anxious about something in life. And whether that's they're worried about their job or they're worried about their family or a health scare or something's happening. God forbid, like the fires that just happened recently in Southern California, or the hurricanes on the East Coast, right? There's always something to be worried about. Having some type of an emergency fund can make a lot of sense for people. And that's just keeping a little bit of cash that's really just in a money market fund, maybe US Treasuries earning 4% a year. It's just there in case you need it. And it's just a matter of figuring out how much do you need and why do you need it?
Right. And again, going back to the personal element of it, each person's going to be different, right?
Yeah.
You'll have someone like a Dave Ramsey saying the true and tested 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses, right? 3 if you're married and there's 2 incomes coming in, or 6 if it's one income. And again, for that, again, another rule of thumb, right?
Yes.
I like to have a little more padded under the mattress, so to speak, where that emergency fund, it's not if, it's when you're going to need it. And it feels really nice being able to say, like, hey, we saved for that. We didn't know what we would be saving for when that, whatever it was, right, occurred. But we have that covered, right? We talk about, how stressful money can be when we don't have some of those things accounted for. And so that's absolutely, I think one of the things I love saying too is, like, you actually don't need a specific event to be saving for. You could just save, right? Here at some point you're going to need it, but there doesn't have to be a goal attached to it. It's a good habit to get into regardless.
Absolutely. And I think everyone's number is different, to your point. I think the question ultimately becomes, like, how much needs to be somewhere so that you can sleep well at night, regardless of what's happening in life or in markets, right? Like, you just want to know you're okay. And, I think from there, when we think about what people can control, if we go shift to markets, people will often be like, the thing that they want to know what's going to happen in markets any given year, right? So, like, even like last year, and people in general, but also the professionals, and professionals are in quotes because it's the Wall Street guys who tell you what the rate of return is going to be of the S&P 500 for the coming year. And last year they were atrocious, and they're atrocious every year because they're trying to predict the future. They don't know how to do it, right? No one does. But what we can control is we can control the amount of risks that we're willing to accept to get returns in the future. And the reason I say that is, if you just accept no risk, all you get is the US Treasury bill, right? You get the short-term Treasury bill that'll give you right now, I think, around 4%. And that's it. That's what you get, because you're not willing to take risk. Risk is what gives you the return. If you did put that risk into the markets, in the US markets last year, you got over 20% returns. Yeah. Really nice. Developed markets were different. But what we can do is we can control how much we're going to put in the stock market, how much we're going to put in the bond market, how much we're going to put into real estate. Look at all of those things and see, like, what's the right allocation for me. And my thought is it would always be derived by, to the point you made earlier, Nick, the goals that you have as an individual. What do you want to be building for? What are we aiming for? That's what we should be using.
Absolutely. I mean, it comes back to, like, what are we planning for, right? To your point, what are we aiming for? And it all ties back, right, to cash flow, right? We got to get that squared away first and foremost. Now, once we have a goal, we got our cash flow shored up, then the fun begins, really. I think that's, I would say probably for both of us, once we have those answers, then it's like, okay, great. What can we start dialing in different accounts for? How much risk do we want to take on? What is our goal? What direction are we going? Right? Because to your point, last year was a phenomenal year in the market, right? And so, but we have to have that cash flow first shored up to be a participant in that, right? And so, a conversation we have all the time, right? As markets did this last year, well over 20%. Well, my portfolio did this. Well, let's go back to, what was the goal of this portfolio? Well, was it because you're buying a house in the next couple of years? Well, guess what? Your return isn't going to match what the market's going to match. Right? Or are we saving for retirement and we still have 20 plus years? Well, time's on our side, being a huge resource, and we can afford to take on a lot more risk. We could take bigger swings.